Welcome back and welcome to this session with Devexperts, one of our sponsors for today's event. And Devexperts is a software company that specializes in the fintech sector, the fintech vertical. And our presenter is Dmitry Gorbanov, who is the QA automation lead at Devexperts. He's based in Portugal and is joining us from there. And Dmitry's presentation is going to be more of a technical presentation than perhaps we've had so far today, which is good. And I'm going to let Dmitry introduce himself and tell you more about what he's going to be covering. But the broad theme is capital market software and risk-based testing challenges. So Dmitry, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Hello, everybody. Let me start the screen sharing. So, hope everybody has a great and productive day, and welcome to my presentation called Capital Market Software, Risk-Based Testing Challenges. First of all, let me introduce myself. So, my name is Dmitry Gorbanov. And I work as an automation team lead, and I work for Devexperts. So with my 15 years in IT and over 10 years in quality control, I became a big fan of test automation and quality control over test automation overall. And on my journey, I became a QA automation survivor because of multiple UI automation projects. Few words about Devexperts. So we are doing fintech since 2002, and by today we employ more than 700 people around the world, and more than 6 users use our trading software to make money. So what I will be covering today is basically, as I said, challenges in testing. What typical challenges we see while testing basically any software? It's the coverage, it's the ability to articulate which requirements are being tested and how. It's the test data, it's the ability to provide us a relevant test data to run with and operate with the dynamic data on the go. It's the execution configuration. It's the ability to provide a proper execution setup and also make sure that the execution goes the right way. And last but definitely not least, it's the reporting. It's the ability to articulate the results so the proper business decisions can be made after our testing. So when it comes to finding solutions to these basic questions, we all know that industry is in a pretty good shape. For any of these tasks, you can find a solution that more or less good for your client or for your project. And basically any typical software pipeline nowadays is some kind of superposition of these tools. But when it comes to real life, when it comes to what we do in fintech, what we all do, there are plenty of real difficult questions appear after you build your pipeline. For example, is it possible to apply risk-based testing to your automated scope? How to interact and how to provide test data, but not only like static test data, but how to manage the dynamic test states and move the system to desired state before even starting the testing, which is really important for fintech. And after all, when you build your risk-based testing and you manage your systems in a very dynamic way, how to maintain the integrity of the pipelines, because number of your pipelines really grows as your system grows. So let's start answering these questions, and let's start with risk-based testing. For those of you who may not be really familiar with this term, but I believe everybody do. But let's do a quick run through. So most probably you or your team is already doing it. It's the testing technique that is used to build effective testing strategy with a limited time frame by defining the test scope directly from the release scope. So you're testing not only the features that has been changed or introduced in this release. And so by doing this technique saves time and money, which is very important, in return of acceptable risk. So you have to accept some kind of risk by missing collateral defects. And what's important for everybody, I believe, is that this technique is applicable to expensive types of test automation. Let's dive into this term. So what is really UI automation? What it really looks like in fintech? So let's take a really simple example of just trading. Let's assume we're going to test thoroughly to test the system, and we will try to test like 4 order types, like limit, market, stop, and maybe some kind of simple advanced order type. Let's assume we are testing 2 sides, it's buy and sell. Let's assume we are testing 5 time and force types, like fill or kill, good or cancelled, etc. Let's assume we're testing on 8 instrument types, including stocks, options, other types of derivatives. Let's assume we're testing on 2 account types, which is cash and margin. And we definitely do want to do different types of actions, like creating the order, canceling the order, editing it, you name it. So this combined gives us more than 5,000 executions to get a full execution set. And some of you may say, okay, this is like an automation, it's cheap. You write it once, it serves you forever, it's super cheap to run, why not run it always? Well, kinda not-ish, because let's do the calculation here. Let's assume we have a full UI automated, full suite automated, and we are really good at optimizing it. So each test runs for 30 seconds, and we're running it in 10 threads. So in this mode, overall execution will go for 4 hours, for more than 4 hours, which is obviously not super applicable to any kind of fast-paced CI mode of the execution. And here the problem is not even finished, because after that, every failure has to be investigated and reproduced, because you will have failures on such a huge scope of execution. So practically, this exhaustive execution of the test cases creates more carbon than sense. On the other hand, if you try to apply risk-based execution, so you only run the tests that are relevant to your release, you run only affected code and tests only against affected code, you will get only meaningful failures. So you won't spend any time on the failures that are not relevant to the changes you have just made. And obviously, you will still have to accept certain small risk of missing collateral defects, but you can modify your risk-based testing to just minimize the value of this risk. So by the end of the day, this type of execution really contributes to manual work reduction, because you do not impose any extra work on manual testers. The examples are cheap. Let's go through the case study to understand how this really works in the real world. So we did that for one of our clients, which happens to be one of the biggest USA stockbrokers. They actually have had and have a pretty huge functional test scenarios. That means they have more than 9,000 cases for backend and more than 4,000 cases for front end. these are really functional tests, really business use cases. And so because of that, risk-based testing is a must, because it's not physically possible to run all these tests within any meaningful time frame. So our goal was to build a robust, extendable test system with automatic test data management, with ability to run risk-based testing and multi-platform, multi-targeted execution. How we did that? So we basically introduced virtualization. So our system under test instances are deployed per each execution. We introduced our own system state management component that allows us to modify the state of the system that is already running. And we made this system state management solution platform agnostic, so it can be used from desktop, web, and mobile tests in the same way. So how virtualization works for this use case? We get the test code, we parse it from the test sources, and we modify it, and we batch it into test sets, and then we apply it to each separate batch is applied to an execution system. So the benefits are obvious. We by applying this scripted execution scope definition, we get a highly dynamic, customizable test scopes. And by utilizing virtualization on the target system, we get very isolated test executions. And by doing that, we can not take care about data integrity, because the databases are all in memory and can be thrown away after execution. But here, where the real world of the capital markets and trading software strikes back again. What about real-time test data? And real-time test data is very important for fintech, because for many scenarios, you want to modify the state of the system you're testing against while it's running. For example, you may want to fill an order, or post a quote, or modify the account portfolio in some way, so your actual functional test will run as you expect it to run. So by doing so, we usually implement, and we implemented it for this client, we are implementing our own QA design pattern we call test service. And the test service is component that integrates into the product itself and allows us to modify system entities on command, post quotes, put trading rules, modify permissions for the users, you name it. And on the other hand, this test service provides a simple, reusable REST API, so test scripts can act as a client for this test service. And by using this REST API, test scripts are really enabled to perform sophisticated system tests. So in detail, the test service, as I said, is an integral part of the product. So it is being developed by automation team together with the dev team. And by doing that, we are unlocking difficult testing scenarios, which requires us to really change the system state. And obviously, as this looks like, if something looks like a backdoor, it is a backdoor. This component should be handled with extra care, and you definitely don't want to enable it in production by mistake. And this common REST module allows any functional test to operate with system entities. So basically, we build this component, and any of our tests, including desktop tests and mobile tests for iOS and Android, and some tests for web applications, are using the same approach of dealing with the system entities. And that really helps moving forward, creating really thousands of cases running more or less smoothly. So what can go wrong with this system? And here is another challenge we face: the pipeline's maintenance problem. To understand where it comes from, let's do a short recap on how risk-based testing is organized. It defines test scope per release, it saves you time and money, and often it turns your pipeline configurations into a nightmare. Why? Let's do a short, really small and easy example. Let's assume we have 4 functional areas. These areas are totally independent and can be tested with no relation to each other. So let's assume we have like in-house trading, some offset trading, some reporting, and some integrations like use, for example. Let's assume we have some overall scope of tests written for these areas. And let's assume on scope of 4 different releases, we're doing different changes, and that requires us to do like risk-based testing. So we select different scopes for each release. What do we see here? What we see here is that for only 4 functional areas on scope of only 4 releases, we already have 16 different executions for our test cases. While in the real world, in the most advanced systems we have worked with, this number of functional areas, of independent areas that can be tested with no relation to each other, can be really up to 30. And in the modern agile world, when we try to push releases like daily, twice a day, on an average span of 20 patches per release, we can easily go to up to 600 unique execution setups to maintain for our project. That's obviously not maintainable and it's practically useless to handle this number of execution setups. So what we did there is we implemented our own self-configuring pipeline. How it actually works is that we start with definition of the scope we want to run. Then we have our own tooling that allows us to get the test plan definition. Usually it is defined by Jira or any other test or task management solution. So we are using our own tooling to fetch the test cases, the test scope directly from the source code, whether it's Java code or Kotlin code or any or Swift code, for example. So we fetch it. Then by our own tooling, we make batches out of what we have just fetched, so we can apply this organized batches onto a continuous integration system. Then we integrate, then we continuously run it in an asynchronous mode, obviously, because tests are really different in terms of how they run. And on the end of the pipeline, we do asynchronous aggregation and reporting, and we are able to detect when the overall batch of batches is finished, so we can notify the stakeholders on the execution finishing. This approach is really used in multiple projects overall for our clients. By doing this, we are really making risk-based testing automated, because we don't have to manually create execution configurations for each release based on the content of this release. And basically, what's nice is that you can apply the same automated approach by using a tool we created. It's called Switchboard. It allows you to do 3 basic actions. It allows you to parse tools test cases from your code. It allows you to transform it, fetch or filter or reorganize in any way in the batches you need, and then you can apply it to a target system you want. Few examples of the usage of this tool in our current practice is for one of the projects, we are fetching Java code based on JUnit 5 based tests. We parse it into batches, and then we automatically create documentation based on the source code annotations, Java docs, comments, and different types of other metadata. So, in other example, we are fetching cases for mobile. These are UI cases, and then we apply it to continuous integration. And by doing that, we are able to apply risk-based testing for the client. So in the first example, we get an automated test documentation and maintenance. And finally, if your code is clean, you are automatically getting the clean documentation. And in the second example, we can give the execution, automated execution of the automated test cases directly to functional testers or stakeholders, so they can define which tests will be executed by their own. So the tool I just described is open under MIT license, and you can get it on our GitHub. So, okay, back to the topic. So, few questions we want to answer here. So, is it possible to apply risk-based testing to automated school? Yes, you should wisely select your test management tool and integrate some kind of automated batching solution. So you don't want to run your tests, especially UI tests, which can be long-running and extremely fragile. You don't want to run them in an exhaustive way. So you want to integrate some automatic batching solution. How to manage not only data but system states. You probably will want to follow the pattern of creating some specific component, like test API component, directly in the system you are dealing with, because again, for financial markets and for capital markets software, it's really critical to not only provide and prepare the static data, but also be able to modify the dynamic data of the system. How to manage the integrity of the pipelines? Well, you can build your own automatic pipeline builder, or if you don't want to invent bicycles, you can use the tool we created to optimize your pipelines. And if you want to know how to build a robust and performing test automation framework, you can always ask us at Devexperts. And we are, as Devexperts, we are providing all types of QA services, starting from consulting, then coming to audit. We can audit your processes and tools and cases. We do functional testing. We do a lot of test automation on any interfaces, either program interfaces or user-facing interfaces. We do performance testing, and we can also do custom services based on your situation. And what's the most important here, our expertise is deeply in fintech. So you don't have to describe what fill or kill order is for us, for example. Yeah. So ask us if you need something related to QA and fintech. That's probably what I had. Thank you for listening, and I'm open to your questions.
Thanks, Dmitry. Perhaps you can come out of the presentation mode so that we can see you properly. We have got a couple of questions. Really interesting presentation. And first of all, George Varghese from Schwab has sent in a question. Dmitry, thanks for the presentation. Great insights, especially into using virtualization techniques. What code coverage goal do you aim for when undertaking risk-based testing methodologies?
That's a very nice question. So our main goal was to be able to provide 100% coverage on the critical paths. So together with business analysis team and functional testing team, we defined the scope of the testing, which represents the most critical paths of the overall software, of the overall training system. So our main goal was to get this coverage fully automated. We ended up at automating 82% of this critical path, because the remaining parts was really hard to automate because it requires like human beings to look at the screen. But overall, this was the goal, and we achieved it.
And I'm going to ask another question about virtualization, actually, as it's come up. And this is a question that has arisen earlier in the today, and it's arisen in previous events that we've run. It's a challenge that even the largest financial firms have, which is in evaluating the ROI from investment in virtualization. So the concern is there's very high maintenance cost for test service virtualization, and indeed any other kind of virtualization for data in general, versus obviously the benefits in automation, which come over the longer term. How do you help your clients evaluate the impact that test service virtualization can have?
Basically, it's quite easy to describe this if you just start to describe all the technologies you will have to couple together to fully cover your testing for your system. So if some advanced system that provides test ability to trade not only from like one interface, like web interface, but also from mobiles and from API for institutional partners and from Apple Watch or whatever, it's obvious that at some point of time you will have to unify at least some parts of this technology stacks to really get it aligned in time, because otherwise, if you won't be providing some unified test management solutions for at least some of your critical interfaces, you will find yourself spending more time on providing infrastructure rather than testing or developing meaningful features.
Yes. So, yes. And you also talked about the Devexperts edge in terms of providing testing services. You're experts in testing for fintechs and complex markets, and you specifically mentioned order filling as a sensitive area, and we've seen some big problems with some of the world's largest exchanges. We don't quite know what the cause of those outages has been over the past 12 months. I mean, I'm talking about Tokyo, the Australian Stock Exchange, really high profile problems. But the suspicion, the conclusion that a lot of people reached is that they have been down to failures in order management systems. You get the snowballing effect of orders that haven't been fulfilled properly, building up, bringing the whole platform down. It's in some respects a load issue. But I mean, my question was, do you see big differences between different types of firms in this area in terms of their performance in testing for things like order fulfillment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So as we have totally different clients from coming us for different reasons, we have like very big established firms with really seriously established processes and with big QA departments and with many levels of compliance to meet. And as well as we are seeing different newer clients which want to be more flexible and which want to deliver faster and which may not that care about establishing like old school waterfall or even V model or something like that. They want to be like iterative as possible. So yeah, we definitely see that, and we're trying to apply our knowledge in order to provide the most effective solutions for the client, because some clients, some bigger clients with well-established processes can, it can be good for them to go through the big automation project with a lot of custom code developed. And for smaller clients, it may be more effective and more returning for them to just apply some existing solutions, to get some open source tools, to combine them into something working really fast, and go with that. So yeah, definitely, it comes from the processes. So basically, it's how the business is organized, but we're trying to reflect that.
Dmitry, thank you very much. We have to end there because our next session is starting soon, but I assume you might be in the Devexperts booth and available to meet. If anybody's interested in talking to Dmitry, go to the meeting hub to the right or go directly to the virtual exhibition and you can meet him there. Thank you so much, Dmitry. Our next session, which is starting at 50 minutes past the hour or 10 to the hour, is on capital markets and wholesale banking. Again, that's our focus. And we have Tahar Jaffer, who's head of the AI team at Scotiabank, and also Prasanth Bachu from UBS, talking about how AI technologies are transforming financial IT in the capital market space. That's starting in just 3 minutes' time. So I've got to leave, and thank you again, Dmitry.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.